12-12. Claude responded, "Day 1 of voluntary minicamp just happened in Cleveland, and I need to talk about it right now, because what Shedeur Sanders did on that field this morning is..." Day 1 of voluntary minicamp just happened in Cleveland, and I need to talk about it right now because what Shedeur Sanders did on that field this morning is the kind of thing that changes the temperature of an entire conversation. Not gradually, immediately. You know how sometimes a player has a moment that just cuts through all the noise, all the takes, all the debate, all the back and forth that has been filling up timelines for months, and replaces it with something concrete and undeniable? That's what happened today. And I don't want to oversell it, but I also refuse to undersell it, because the details matter and the details were genuinely impressive. Let me give you the actual football first, because that's where this story lives. Todd Monken gave Shedeur Sanders 11-on-11 reps on the very first day of voluntary minicamp. Not a controlled walkthrough, not a skeleton drill with no pass rush and half-speed coverage. 11-on-11, live looks, real defensive pressure. The kind of reps that reveal exactly where a quarterback is mentally and physically, because there's nowhere to hide when it's full personnel and everyone is competing. And in those reps, on day 1, Shedeur completed 80% of his passes. I want you to sit with that number for a second before we go any further. 80% in 11-on-11 reps on the first day of voluntary minicamp. Not game conditions, I understand that, but genuine competitive reps against a real NFL defense, without the cushion of preseason warm-up games or weeks of training camp repetitions building toward a performance peak. He walked in off the offseason and immediately operated at a level that most quarterbacks don't reach until they've been in a system for months. And it wasn't the completion percentage alone, it was how he was completing them. He wasn't throwing checkdowns. He wasn't taking the path of least resistance, padding the number with safe throws that keep the stat clean but don't actually demonstrate anything meaningful about a quarterback's readiness. He was throwing with aggression, with timing, with the kind of decisive trigger that tells you the pre-snap read happened correctly and the post-snap confirmation happened fast enough to actually act on it. That's the detail that caught my attention most. The processing speed. Watch the specific play that's been circulating from practice. Shedeur tilts his weight. His eyes are already moving across the coverage. He's identifying the leverage, confirming what the pre-snap read told him, and then the ball is out. Clean release. Accurate trajectory. Completion. The whole sequence happens in a window that gives a pass rusher no time to effect the throw, which is not accidental. That's a quarterback whose mental operation is running ahead of the physical play rather than trying to catch up to it. That's exactly what Monken's system demands, and Shedeur demonstrated it on day 1 of the first voluntary session. The long ball work was its own statement. There's been a persistent thread in the skeptical coverage of Shedeur that questions his arm strength, whether he can make the throws that stretch the field and create the vertical threat that opens everything else up underneath. Today was a direct response to that specific doubt, delivered in the most efficient possible way. He dropped back, used his natural leverage and arm length, and launched the ball downfield with the kind of touch and trajectory that puts it in a window only the receiver can reach. Dropped it right in. The touch on a deep ball is actually harder to fake than pure arm strength because it requires feel. The ability to calibrate arc and pace based on where the receiver is running and how the coverage is positioned. Shedeur showed that feel today. Clean, on target, on time, and then the left side touchdown strike, which is the play I think tells the most complete story about where he is right now. He scans left, identifies the opening, fires the ball into a specific spot, and the receiver catches it in stride with room to work after the catch. That play requires every element of functional quarterback performance to work simultaneously. The pre-snap identification, the post-snap confirmation, the decision, the delivery, the placement. It's not a difficult throw in isolation, but the fact that it happened in sequence, as part of a full practice rep with real coverage and real pressure, with the correct read happening fast enough to create the timing window, that's meaningful. That's what functional NFL quarterback play actually looks like when it's working. Now let me talk about what Todd Monken did that I think is being underreported in the coverage of today's session, because there was a specific detail from his first practice as head coach that tells you something important about the seriousness of how he's approaching Shedeur's development. He installed cameras on the quarterback's helmets, not for content, not for social media clips, for coaching, so that the staff can literally watch the quarterback's field of vision as he processes the coverage, see exactly where his eyes go, in what sequence, at what pace, and whether the visual processing matches the decision that gets made. That is an extraordinary investment in understanding how a quarterback thinks, not just how he throws. And when you combine that technological commitment with the rep distribution Monken has already described, first-team reps going to one quarterback more than others. The picture that emerges is of a coaching staff that is all in on developing Shedeur Sanders to his ceiling and is using every available tool to do it. The relationship dimension is the one Shedeur himself spoke to after practice, and I think it's easy to dismiss as standard praise your coach media talk, but I don't think that's the right read here. He talked about Monken with genuine enthusiasm, not the diplomatic, professionally appropriate kind that players produce when they're managing a public relationship with their coach, but the specific kind of excitement that comes from someone who has found a coaching environment where they feel trusted and pushed at the same time. He said the staff embraces players as people first and then pushes them relentlessly in meetings, on the field, in the weight room. He called it a new vibe, a new energy. When a quarterback describes his coaching staff that way, in the earliest phase of their working relationship, it tells you the trust is being built correctly. And when the trust between a quarterback and his head coach is real, it shows up in performance, in the willingness to take risks, make aggressive decisions, throw into tight windows without the hesitation that comes from uncertainty about whether the coaching staff will support you through the inevitable mistakes. What Shedeur said to the media after practice, though, is where I want to spend some real time, because it was revealing in a way that goes beyond the standard post-practice presser. He called out the negative narrative directly. He told the people who have been spending energy trying to convince the world he's not ready, not good enough, not the answer. He told them to change the direction of that energy and actually support the team they claim to care about. That's not a throwaway comment. That's a quarterback who has been paying attention to what's been said about him, who has processed it, and who is choosing to respond not with defensiveness or resentment, but with a challenge. Show up correctly or stay out of the way. If you want this team to win, get behind the people trying to win. I respect that kind of clarity, not because criticism should be immune from response. Accountability journalism and honest analysis serve the sport, but because the specific criticism that has followed Shedeur since before the draft has often had a quality that had less to do with honest football evaluation and more to do with something harder to name. The resistance to fully crediting what he demonstrated, the tendency to reach for alternative explanations when he performed well and amplify every mistake when he didn't, the reluctance to account for circumstances that would have been front and center in any analysis of a different player in the same situation. Shedeur has watched all of that, absorbed it, and chosen to respond by doing the work and then calling the direction of the narrative what it actually is. That's competitive maturity. It's the kind of thing that coaching staffs and teammates notice, because here's what today was actually about at the level that matters most. It wasn't just about one practice performance, impressive as the numbers were. It was about a quarterback showing the people who are going to trust their careers and their seasons to him that the offseason investment was real. The voluntary workouts he attended when others didn't, the captain role he's been building into, the film study and the scheme installation, and the relationship building with receivers and linemen, all of it showed up today in an 80% completion rate and a long ball dropped into the hands of a downfield receiver with the kind of touch that doesn't come from natural talent alone. It comes from preparation, from doing the work when no one required you to, over and over, until the work becomes the standard rather than the exception. There's a version of the Cleveland quarterback situation that the national conversation has been treating as still genuinely open, as if Watson or Gabriel could realistically emerge from this competition as the answer if the right sequence of events unfolds. I think that version of the conversation is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, honestly. Not because the formal competition isn't real. It is, and Monken will evaluate daily and adjust based on evidence, but because the informal competition has been producing a consistent result for months. The voluntary workout attendance, the captain designation, the locker room belief, the Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward comments, the coaching staff's rep distribution signals, and now day one of voluntary minicamp, where Shedeur Sanders walked onto the field and completed 80% of his passes in 11-on-11 reps, while throwing with the aggression and timing of a quarterback who isn't auditioning, he's arriving. The thing I keep thinking about when I process the totality of what's happened in Cleveland since Shedeur arrived is how rare this kind of convergence actually is. The organizational commitment, the coaching staff investment, the locker room belief, the individual preparation, and now the on-field performance all pointing in the same direction at the same time. That doesn't happen often. Most quarterback situations have tension between at least some of those elements. A coaching staff that believes in a player the front office is uncertain about, or a locker room that hasn't fully committed to someone the coaches are promoting, or a player whose preparation doesn't match the belief being placed in him. In Cleveland right now, all of the signals are aligned, and when that alignment exists, when a young quarterback has the full organizational infrastructure pointed toward his development and responds to it the way Shedeur responded today, the results that follow are usually not subtle. Cleveland has has been waiting for a long time for a quarterback who could make a city forget the last guy and the one before him, and the one stretching back through more than 2 decades of false starts. What happened on that practice field today is one data point, not a season. But it's a data point that landed exactly the way the building needed it to land. With authority, with precision, with the casual confidence of someone who is exactly where he's supposed to be, doing exactly what he was always going to do. The doubts got torched today, as somebody who was watching put it. And the person doing the torching was the same person who showed up to voluntary workouts when nobody required him to, who earned a captain role before the formal competition opened, who has been building toward this moment since before he walked through the doors of the Cleveland facility. Day one delivered. The question now is just how far this goes.